as we continue our series on unlikely heroes in the Bible. Have you heard the story about the poor Christian widow that lived next door to an atheist? Repeatedly, the atheist would challenge the poor old widow as how could she believe in a God when she was so poor, barely able to support herself? Why would you pray to a God that's left you so poor? The woman would simply reply, I know the Lord will supply all that I need. During one tough month, the Christian widow was seen praying on her front window by her atheist neighbor. And he thought he'd play a little trick on her. So the atheist man went to the local grocery store and brought bags and bags of groceries and placed them secretly during the night at her front door. In the morning, the atheist man was kind of sneakily watching, and he saw the Christian widow rejoicing with all her strength over the groceries left by her door. Immediately, with his snickering evil grin, the man went next door and knocked on the widow's door. She answered the door, rejoicing over the provision. Look, she said to the atheist man, the Lord has provided for me. Ha! The atheist abruptly interjected. No God has provided you with the food, I did. Slowly but deliberately, the old Christian widow responded to the atheist man. Yes, God has provided for me, and he even used the devil to do it. Widows in Jesus' time knew what it was like to trust, because as one commentator of our passage states, they were the weakest, most defenseless people in society. People without any prospects of fending for themselves. In the section of Mark 12, Jesus noticed what normal, everyday, coming to the temple people couldn't see. Jesus was looking at their hearts. He sees through the symbols of success in his culture and ours. He sees the teachers in the temple in their fancy robes, a symbol of status for them. Jesus listens as these teachers are greeted with respect in the public markets. He sees how the teachers of the law have the important seats in the church, pushing those who need God's word of hope to the back of the church. Jesus sees the teachers of the law feasting on the abundant meals at banquets, being asked if each course of the meal was satisfactory to their needs. All the while, Jesus sees that the synagogue and temples are filled with people who worship God on the Sabbath, and then during the week take advantage of the widows by easily foreclosing on their houses. Here's what I mean. During Jesus' time, all the workers in the temple were dependent upon the givings of the people to support their livelihood. The teachers of the law were just as dependent upon the giving as the poor widow was. The teachers of the law received no set salary as the poor widow. So you can see that there was kind of a tendency to abuse. What Jesus is pointing out is that the abuse of these teachers of the law, taking extra out of the kitty, a little out of the offering plate for themselves, leaves the temple treasury with little to help widows or poor people. That's why I believe Jesus is saying the teachers of the law are guilty of devouring the widows' houses. Ultimately, Jesus sees that God's temple, which is supposed to be the place where widows receive financial support, teaching about God, and a chance to bring their needs in prayer before God, as actually doing the opposite of what God intended his place of worship to be for hurting and struggling people. Because Jesus sees through all the social climbing, the academic prowess, and pretense, he also sees the needs of our hearts. Jesus sees the heart of the widow. That's so important. Of all the people in our world, to realize that Jesus sees the heart of the widow. And as ministers, our need to be see what Jesus sees too. I don't believe, though, that Jesus is kind of against financial success or education or celebratory banquets. In fact, Jesus at the wedding of Cana produced over 400 bottles of the finest wine probably ever tasted before in Palestine. So Jesus isn't against celebrations. Now, I believe Jesus sees how these good things have become more important to the leadership of the temple than helping others like the widows and having access to God's help in life. At the temple, Jesus is watching and seeing the hearts of those giving at the temple treasury. Now, the temple area where the money was given was in the court of the women. So they couldn't go beyond that into the further courts. Only men would be able to, and then even Jewish men. So a Gentile couldn't go farther in. But this treasury area had 13 trumpet-shaped receptacles where people could put in free will offerings. So each receptacle had this sign over it, indicating the use of the money placed in each one. So Jesus sees the wealthy putting in large amounts, and he knows that their giving is giving from their excess wealth. Makes me wonder which receptacle are they putting it in. And as the temple workers, are they watching to see, yes, and put it into the temple care or something, right? Or is it the poor and needy? But they also had the tax too as well. So they also had a temple tax that they would put in one of those receptacles as well. So maybe they took some of their money out of the temple tax. I'm not sure how it works, but I can just picture this imagination of mine, which is sometimes, as you know, sometimes kind of weird. But it's just picturing, watching which ones, they're putting it in. So Jesus knows that their giving requires no sacrifice for the wealthy on their part. Then this widow comes and puts 2 small copper coins. They're actually called lepton. The lepton was the smallest form of currency in Palestine at that time. And her contribution was worth, get this, 132nd of a day's wage for the daily labor. Those coins were so poorly made that over time they would easily wear off. Their copper, the insignia on there would wear off, and they pretty much were kind of worthless. But that's not what Jesus sees. Jesus sees her gift as giving all that she had to live on. So it makes me wonder, what is the point of this text? And why does Jesus highlight this widow in his teaching? Does Jesus want us to give all the money that we have to live on to the church? No, I don't believe so. I believe Jesus wants his disciples to see, as one commentator states, the temple treasury itself was set up in such a way that it fed off those who cannot fend for themselves. What is worse, because it is the temple treasury, it has an inherent claim to divine legitimation. How could it be involved in injustice? It is God's own house. We need to see ourselves as God's stewards and servants of God's money. That's what Jesus was really claiming for the people. This was God's temple. This money was to use to help everyone. Jesus wanted the temple treasury to be there to help the widow, not the other way around. When we see ourselves as stewards of God's money, we should think like the Christian thinker Augustine stated, that we find out how much God has given us, and we from it take what we need. The reminder is needed by others. In his book, Managing God's Money, Randy Alcorn speaks to how giving away money actually puts us in a position of financial weakness. We don't like that. No one does. We prefer helping the sick and poor from a position of health and wealth. But giving away our excess does something for us that keeping or spending it doesn't. It makes us once again be reminded that we are dependent on God, and keeps us open to the possibility that at some point, while we journey along, we may have to be dependent on others, just as they are currently depending on us. I think that's why the widow is the unlikely hero in today's passage. She remembered that she was totally dependent on God for everything. She knew what it meant to be dependent on God and others, yet she still made a contribution that showed incredible trust in God's provision. Jesus saw. He saw her incredible sacrifice. And he yearns for others to be a part of God's provision for each other. I'm going to can you put up the picture there? We looked at this picture during Bible study this week. It's this great picture of a child that looks like he's running away. Have any of you ever had one of your children kind of do this, where they get their suitcase together? I won't name any names, but maybe you were a child and you did this. You did this with your parents, how you tell the story, where you pack your bag, you get maybe to the end of the driveway, and you kind of, think that, I'm leaving out this, So I love this image of a child leaving home, kind of, per se, with their suitcase, and they don't realize that sooner or later, they're not going to have any food. They're not going to have anybody that's going to help them. Who do I trust? I'm a young child. I can't really go out and have a job, really support myself. They might think they're independent and but they don't realize how dependent they really are. And I believe this is a really metaphor of the widow, but all of us. We don't really realize how dependent we really are. We might be like that stubborn little child. I'm going to go and do it. I'm not going to put up with your rules here anymore, Mom and Dad, But sooner or later, we all come to realize, even the hat I'm wearing, the coat, everything's been given to me. I haven't earned any of it on my own. It's been such a blessing. I want you to remember that image as we think of our new ministry that we're looking to be Compassionate Response. That we'll remember and believe really all of us are so dependent upon God and His provision. And we're just like those children walking along with our suitcase on a journey of life together. I've been really remarked this past week by those Honduras people migrating to the U.S. Through Mexico and everything. And I was just thinking, can you imagine walking that far and trying to have a better life? And they're walking together. Why? Because they're scared to walk by themselves. Because they know that there's people that can take advantage of them. They're getting together to just have strength in numbers. God wants us to trust in His provision, but He also wants us to be a church, not like the temple was in Jesus' time, but where they're taking from the widows, but providing them with what they need for the journey of life. To know God is a God that provides and cares. I'm going to call the praise team up, and we're going to sing in our prayer time again.